This is Tom Fox, and I would like to welcome you to episode 160 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I have a special episode. I actually have two of my colleagues on the podcast. I have Jay Rosen, Vice President of Translations at Merrill Brink, and Mike Volkov of the Volkov Law Group. I visit with both of them who attended Compliance Week 2015 annual conference, which just concluded, and I visit with them about some of their observations of Compliance Week and where they think the compliance function may be going forward. The episode comes in at just over 24 minutes with the combined times. This podcast is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions, and I would ask you to stay tuned at the end of the podcast because I'm going to have a special, exciting new announcement for listeners of this podcast. This is Tom Fox, and I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you for listening. Well, this is Tom Fox again, and I'm continuing the conversation with attendees at Compliance Week. We have just wrapped up Compliance Week 2015, and I'm here with Jay Rosen, Vice President of Merrill Brink.
Hey, Tom. Great time, huh?
Yes, so we thought what we would do for this part of the podcast is have a wrap-up session on kind of our observations, what we may have learned, who we talked to, and everything else about Compliance 20 Week 15. So, Jay, what are some of your initial impressions here as we end today?
One of the key takeaways is I think that Matt Kelly and his group here at Compliance Week really put together one of the most sophisticated conferences out there. I'm happy to say that in the 2.5 days, I didn't hear anybody talk about the books and records, and I didn't hear anybody talking about the reach of the FCPA. So I think there's a certain level of knowledge that's assumed from this crowd here. I think it's challenging, and I think the real diversity of subject matter that's presented here makes it one of the preeminent conferences to attend during the year.
I'm really sorry to hear you didn't attend any of my conferences where I talked about the books and records and the reach of the FCPA, so thanks for that vote of confidence.
Well, I knew I would get you on that one, but I'm saying really, I think from the level of discourse that's happening here, it really shows that in the 10 years that Compliance Week has been around, that this sometimes misunderstood profession really is gaining traction. And I think a key stat that they said is that 57% of chief compliance officers are now going directly to the CEO. And that really tends to focus on how a corporation sees a chief compliance officer as an ally, and it's no longer somebody who's a narc or somebody who's there to say no, but it's a partner into how to make business decisions, to make ethical and correct ones.
It's interesting, the statistic you quoted, that came up in our panel, next to last panel today, which is the last day of the conference. But I'd like to go back to the start of the conference, and channeling my 18-year-old daughter, I immediately felt a different vibe Sunday evening at the cocktail party here for the introduction of the conference. There seemed to be a lot of buzz, a lot more excitement. The cocktail party probably had twice as many people as normal, and it seemed to have a different feel. Did you sense that at all on Sunday?
Yeah, there was just like the diversity of the attendees, and there was that kind of excitement that was in the air. People were happy to see old friends, and really they have this great app that they've used this week for Compliance Week, and there's just a lot of folks who are snapping pictures and really making comments. And again, there's a lot of interactivity here, and one of the things that's encouraged is little to no PowerPoint, and giving the attendees an opportunity, especially some of the conversations, to really drill down and learn about things. So there is that excitement that's in the air.
I was really struck with the first panel on the first day of Monday, where we had chief compliance officers from three of the U.S.'s largest corporations. We had General Electric, we had Walmart, I should say the deputy chief compliance officer from Walmart, and the chief compliance officer from Boeing. And they talked about a very strategic vision of compliance, yet were able to give us a concrete and tangible example of one takeaway that any compliance officer could implement in their compliance program today, no matter what size of the company. I say all that as a way of introduction, that we seem to have a lot more strategic vision given in the sessions this year than I had heard before. Did you sense that at all?
Yeah, I think we've really moved away from some of those buzzwords, people talking about tone at the top and tone at the middle, but really trying to, what was the gentleman's name? Donnie, who was here from Tyson's and gave the keynote at day one. And I mean, this was a CEO who read this wonderful idea about what your code of conduct could be, and the punchline was that this was Kenneth Lay's code of conduct at Enron. And the quick takeaway from there is, you can have a piece of paper, you can have all these aspirations, but unless there are leaders who are talking the talk and walking the walk, it's all worthless. And I think that there are people now who are being able to share tips, to your point, that are concrete, that can be woven into everyday examples of ethics and compliance, and not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for your business, to be profitable, to save your reputation, and to go on the right path. So if you have these large conglomerates like Walmart and GE and Boeing being that sensitive to these issues, I think it sets the tone for what other companies should be following as a benchmark for best practices.
I was struck by the two talks. One was by Assistant Attorney General Leslie Caldwell, which was a keynote on Tuesday, and then a panel I moderated this morning with Representative Carol Brockmeyer and Laura Perkins from the Department of Justice, both work in FCPA enforcement, that the government is continuing to provide solid information for the compliance practitioner. I write and I think and I talk about these, but you are really on the front lines of having to implement some of these specific solutions. For a product and solution provider such as yourself, are those types of communications useful for you to take back?
Yeah, I think, we speak about this a lot, Tom. Although my prime mission is to help companies communicate globally, whether it's with codes of conduct or looking at certain information in an investigation, the thing that people really want to know are what are the actionable things that can happen. And it seems that whenever Leslie Caldwell speaks, and I think this really goes back to Chuck DeRoss and the guidance that came out 2 years ago, is that the DOJ really seems to be taking concrete steps to demystify the process here. And they want to teach people best practices and what you need to do. And those are things that I want to talk about, because if somebody says to me, well, what do you see happening out there, code of conduct? What are you doing? And a lot of things that we're starting to see is those examples that were given in the guidance are now included in the code of conduct. So there'll be a little blowout box and they'll say, if somebody asks you to do this, what's the right answer to it? So those kind of things, when you hear that from the DOJ, people take that and then they start to work them into their programs.
Well, unfortunately, you weren't in the session when Carol Brockmeyer said, and when you bring us the documents, I want them translated.
Yeah, you're right. There's no excuse. I hope you heard that, Jim Moore.
I looked for you, but I didn't see you. But it turned out you were across the hall at another presentation, which you and Matt were describing for me. Could you describe the presentation with the Chief Compliance Officer, who I believe was from Hay Corporation in China?
I think you say higher.
Okay.
But they're the largest white goods manufacturing company in the world.
What's a white goods manufacturing company?
Washing machines, refrigerators, those kind of things that you buy at Sears.
That would be appliances for those of you in the South.
And he, I believe he was the first Chinese chief compliance officer that we have ever had here at Compliance Week. And he was just really wonderful, because he was able to really talk about this very difficult idea of what compliance is, and he used very common English vernacular, talked about that, if he needs to get something done, he's willing to take off his shirt and fight the next guy. And one of the things that he showed up there was this interesting graphic, and it was a smiley-faced airplane with 4 engines. And he said that working compliance at Higher Group is being in a position of changing out 4 engines simultaneously on a flying jet. And
Wow.
yeah, and everything is really value-based there. So they take a look at everybody's time, and if you're going to work on this project, what would you be budgeted at, and would this $100,000 or would this $5,000 be time well spent? So it really seems like there's a meritocracy there, and there's a culture of continuous improvement, and that's something that, you know, compliance is not a static activity. There always has to be continuous improvement. You always have to be refreshing. You have to be looking for best practices, and you know, this is like, you know, an airplane replacing 4 engines while you're flying. I mean, what an incredible metaphor, and how sophisticated to be thinking about that when, you know, you're just in an industry that, you know, oh, we're making washers, we're making dryers, but they're striving to change and be the best. And another thing that Jeffrey Wu said, he says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And again,
Very interesting.
that's what's baked in, and that's what he's trying to do. He was former PwC, and he worked elsewhere, but it was a great panel. He was on it. Raphael Richmond, the CCO from Ford, and then somebody who was also there from MasterCard. So real diverse industries, heavy industry, manufacturing, and financial products, but all sharing kind of like compliance is the journey, and you have to honor that journey.
Let me ask you, change subject or focus just a little bit, because you are a service provider within this industry. And one of the things that I try to advocate is that service providers are a part of the compliance solution. Do you feel like either that message is resonating, or you're able to further that message at Compliance Week?
Yeah, I think you know, that's a great question, Tom. One of the things that I've tried to do to differentiate what we do at Merrill Brink is we're not simply about having a commoditized product, which is translating words. Anybody can translate words. But by really being an active participant in the industry, by being able to continue the conversation with folks like you and on LinkedIn and in blogs, I think people do look to vendors for new ideas. That's where it's going to come from. And then you have people who actually work both sides of the aisle. So if you have somebody like Paige Motes, who's over at Dell, she got her start in the learning business, and she was at LRN. So I think one of the things you'll start to see going forward is people changing sides of the aisle. And I think it's too much of a very Catholic view to say that somebody...
Did you just say Catholic?
Yes.
Do I interpret that to mean not the Catholic Church, but universal?
Yes.
Thank you.
That somebody is bad because they're a vendor, right? Somebody doesn't have any credit. Somebody needs to be kept in the room where the coffee is. Right. And the ideas come from the vendors, because we are trying to figure out how to help you do it better, quicker, and cheaper. And I think that kind of cross-pollination of ideas is also a good reason. If you look at the folks who are sponsoring Compliance Week and the folks who are up here on the dais and speaking, they are the people who are on the forefront. And you know, we heard from the CEB, we heard from Deloitte, we heard from people who are out there who are actually working with companies who have these challenges and helping them to try to solve these problems.
Jay, as we end today here in Washington, we really sort of move to the summer conference season, which means really not too many conferences. But as we look forward to the fall, certainly with SCCE, will Merrill Brink be at SCC, and will you be a participant again this year?
Yes, I will. I'm going to be leading a couple of the advanced sessions, and one thing that they're trying this year at SCCE is that, you know, if you've been a pro and you've attended a couple times, you want to move on to a more robust type of discussion. And I'm going to be leading a couple sessions where we take a look at best practices in travel and entertainment. So it's not going to be so much about presenting information, but it's going to be more about facilitating a discussion, and they're going to use some of that software where you can pose a question to the audience, people will vote on it, and then we'll be talking about that. So I'll be participating, and look forward to. If anybody does have an opportunity, I would highly recommend to come the day before the conference starts on Saturday. There's a community works project that we do. We've been working at a veterans home for the last several years, and we go back and we repaint and we refresh. And it's a real wonderful opportunity to get sweaty and dirty, but to do something good and to meet some fellow practitioners who are out of the conference room setting and just to get to know some more people.
Jay, thanks very much. It's been a great conference, I think, probably for both of us, and safe travels home.
Same to you, Tom. Take care.
Hello again, this is Tom Fox, and I'm back here with Compliance Week with my good friend and colleague Mike Volkov. Mike is in town for the conference. Welcome, Mike.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Good to see you, as always.
Mike, one of the things I'm visiting with folks about is some of their impressions of this 10th annual Compliance Week annual event. What have you thought, felt, or observed so far?
Well, it's more confirmation of the sort of explosion of the compliance profession. I also think this is a really good event because it's in D.C. and the thing I've noticed is they take a lot of time to make a relevant agenda. Some other shows you go to, it's the same agenda over and over. Here they tailor it to what the real issues are, and they have really excellent speakers. I mean, they get really good speakers.
Mike,
including Tom Fox, of course.
Mike, this morning the keynote was a panel which had the Chief Compliance Officer from GE, the Chief Compliance Officer from Walmart, and I forgot the third Chief Compliance Officer. I'm sorry.
GE, Walmart, and Boeing.
Boeing.
Yeah.
And they talked about complexity in the compliance program. Anything that they said resonated with you?
Well, absolutely. There were a couple observations from that panel. Number one is these are well-heeled, very resource-heavy compliance programs. Nonetheless, with all the resources, all the people, every system you can think of that they want, they realized and recognized the value of communicating in simple terms, a message that's simple, and making sure that you don't overload people with information and get your compliance culture tied to that simple message. So I thought that was really helpful. It's always good to hear about the best of the best, and these are the best of the best, because you can take kernels of wisdom from them and apply it to your own program. But it's not relevant to sit there and say, I'm going to put my program together like GE, because I'm just not, I don't have those resources or the support that I need. But they're good lessons learned in those presentations.
The message of simplicity was really driven home to me by Dan Trujillo from Walmart when he talked about they have 2.2 million employees, right, and they have to have the lowest common denominator of message they can communicate.
And that was, and I think Walmart is a really good example. I just recently met the Chief Compliance Officer from Home Depot who told me, imagine doing a training program and then a quarter of your employees leave within each year, and you're always sort of swimming up channel to try to get everybody trained. And I think we take it for granted that all companies are not just professional organizations where people stay forever. And I thought the message from Walmart of 2.2 million employees globally was just incredible to think about designing a program that's going to work for those employees. I mean, and they truly are trying to get to every employee.
From Al Rosen at GE, one of the things that struck me was he talked about not just management's commitment, but how management burns in compliance to their day-to-day message, to all of their reports. It seemed to me to be, at least at GE, it not only starts with the top, but it resonates down from the top.
Yeah, I was also struck, I think it was Al who spoke about how in the business meetings, without compliance folks necessarily present, the business leaders were taking time to devote to a compliance message or a compliance agenda. So they were owning it in a way where it didn't necessarily depend upon having a compliance person in the room. And I thought that, and I thought that was fascinating because we always hear about you want to have business be a partner and work on it, but here they were not only doing
Next
that,
up is Mike Volkov of the Volkov Law Group. His section comes in at just over 7 minutes. And please stay on the podcast after Mike's interview finishes for an exciting new announcement. Thank you very much.
No question about it. And, there are legendary stories of Jack Welch and his commitment to ethics and compliance, but it clearly has permeated every aspect of that company's operation. And Tom, we've talked about this. I always say that the only company that probably could have bought Alstom without the Justice Department holding it up for months and months and years is a company like GE, because they trust it in the end.
The Boeing CCO had an interesting technique that they use, which is not only rigorous investigations, but rigorous after-action reports, and using those investigations, root cause analysis, and reports as teaching moments going forward. Any other corporations that you're aware of that use it to the extent she described?
No, I thought that was interesting as well. I'm not aware of many companies that take actual real cases and break them down into vignettes and then use them as a teaching moment or a training moment. So I was intrigued by that. One of the concerns I had would be privacy interests, and you have to make sure you design it in an innocuous enough way that you don't identify any people. So I would be, but I thought it was a very good idea. I went to a panel discussion after that, the main one that was on internal investigations.
How was that?
That was very good, and there was a really interesting point raised there, which is one of the persons who's the head of internal investigations for a company mentioned that the best thing they ever did for their Speak Up culture was to actually fire somebody for retaliation against a whistleblower. And my concern with that was, well, I hope they didn't publicize the name of the person, but they said it sent shockwaves through the company that they would protect people who are whistleblowers and fire people who try to retaliate against a whistleblower. So there's always that tension of you want to use general examples of things, but you don't want to identify people because of employment and privacy concerns.
Mike, it looks like our break room is filling up, so perhaps we're going to have to sign off. But before we do, tell everybody the website for the Volkov Law Group and your blog site.
My blog site is www.corruptioncrimecompliance.com, all one big word, and my law firm is www.volkov Law, VOLKOV, law, all one word, .com. Thanks, Tom.
Mike, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
This is Tom Fox again. I'm going to start a program where I will take listeners' questions or comments and use those in a podcast. So if you have a question you would like me to explore on my podcast, I hope you will put it in the comments section, or you can email me directly at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Thank you very much for listening.